We are thrilled to welcome you to this WICxCLOUDJOBS webinar session. This session is going to be about tired to hired. It's about how to get you hired and learn those job readiness skills that are often forgotten in the job search process, like writing an effective resume, how to reach out to recruiters and actually build a relationship with them and not just get lost in the messages. Today, we have Terry Rice with us. Terry Rice is a fractional executive holding senior roles at two distinct companies. Terry is the Executive VP of People, Operations, and Experience at Lions and Tigers and the CEO at the Dazzle Cleaning Company. He is a builder and an innovator with a background in a wide range of industries, including cruise ships, tech startups, and even a stint with a local circus company. In his current role at Lions and Tigers, Terry leads people care and development, talent acquisition, diversity and inclusion, and internal operations. He advocates for more inclusive, more flexible, and more human-centric workplaces. I will go ahead and pass it over to Terry. We're so excited to have you here today.
I'm going to drop a link into the chat here. And if anybody's never used a Menti board before, you're just going to click that link and you'll be invited then to enter the code. And you can answer the question, how are you showing up today? How are you feeling? Where are you at in the job hunt? Are you feeling excited? Are you feeling a little worn down by it? So take a moment. I'm going to stop talking and just respond to that question. We'll look at those together. Okay, we're starting to get some answers. So can everybody see that Menti board? Great. So we're seeing overwhelmed, discouraged, actively job hunting, but maybe discouraged by the lack of responses, tired, an Excel sheet with almost 50 jobs applied to. Ooh. I'll scroll down there. A little bit of energy behind the job hunt. Okay. Someone's looking to hire talents. Great. Love to see it. We'll have a moment of community building here in a bit. And recent graduates. Okay. So we've got sort of a mix of how folks are feeling. Let's just acknowledge that if you're in the job market right now, it can feel hard. And that's okay. It's okay to have that sense that this is exhausting. This is a tough moment. So I just want us to kind of keep a little bit of space here, that there's a lot of different ways that we might be showing up to our conversation today. Okay. Now I can do this. I've got one more question for you. You should. Sorry, 1 second. Oh no. Are you able to see the next question? What do you want to take away from this session? If you're in the Menti link. Okay. Okay, that's too bad, but I'm just going to respond on the fly. It's okay. I'm going to ask a second question, and I'm just going to ask folks to, instead responding to the Menti link, just put it in the chat. What do you want to take away from our time together? We're going to have about 45 minutes, and I just want to hear kind of what are some of the key points that you're hoping that we get to talk about. So go ahead and put those answers in the chat, and I'm going to get our PowerPoint started today. How to make a standout resume, how to accurately reflect myself on the resume. Great. What else? Confidence building strategies. Absolutely. We will talk about some confidence building strategies. We might not make it to interviews, but we're going to save some time for an Ask Me Anything. So we can talk a little bit about interviews there. Got it. Okay. Let's get going. So I mentioned this at the beginning, but today, our time together is a working session. Again, I don't want to leave you with tips or tricks or hacks on how you might stand out through this process, but instead I want to make sure that everybody leaves today with some concrete strategies that you feel really confident implementing. So you're going to want to have, as we go through our time together today, a copy of your most recent resume. You're going to want to have the most recent message that you have sent in your job hunt process, either to a recruiter or to somebody who works at the same company that you were trying to build a networking connection with. And then the third is you're going to want an Excel spreadsheet or similar, Excel, Google. You're going to want some sort of a sheet that you can work on. So 3 things that you're going to want to have as we go forward: your resume, recruiter outreach message, and an Excel sheet. All right. So let's start with the resume building. Why do we start with the resume? In many ways, this is the equivalent of a product marketing one sheet or one pager. And it's the basis for how you're going to communicate your skills and your individual unique expertise. And so there's 2 strategies we'll talk about today as it relates to resume building. The first strategy is to really think about how to make every word on the resume count. And so what does that mean? Well, the strategy we're going to talk about right now is to remove duties that can be reasonably assumed based off your job position. So I've given an example here of my own resume, which I lead an HR and talent acquisition team. And so the example is responsible for overall HR strategy and team operations, yada, yada. That is probably something that an informed reader of my resume can assume based off of my role that I have that responsibility. So maybe a better version is to pivot that bullet point on the resume to be outcome focused, right? So developed and implemented company's first parental leave policy. And then I say some other things there. So that's a really tangible outcome. And it demonstrates that I have that expertise in overall HR strategy by talking about the outcome of the work that I've done for the organization. So I want to have everybody pull up your resume and do a quick read of your resume and highlight 1 or 2 bullet points that perhaps if somebody who is an informed reader of your resume is looking at that resume, perhaps they assume that they could assume that is something that would come within your job scope. So take a moment and find 1 or 2 bullet points that you can highlight that are assumed duties. If you can put maybe a thumbs up in the chat if you found something on your resume that you feel like matches this criteria, that would be great. Okay, I'm seeing some thumbs up, finding some of those assumed duties. Let's take another moment and let you look through that resume. It's a great example from Marissa in the chat. Okay. Part 2. We want to now take that, just select one of the bullets that you found in your resume or one of the sentences that you found in your resume, and let's rewrite that to reflect the outcome of those assumed duties. So if you have a metric or a program launch or a specific deliverable or outcome, let's rewrite that sentence to reflect what it is that was created or what was the value that was created out of that duty. Take a moment. If you need to put, an X in place of a specific metric or percentage for the purposes of our activity today, if you know you can go back and get that, that's fine. But take a moment and select one of the sentences or bullets that you found and rewrite that to be outcome oriented. As you're doing that, I'll just keep an eye on the chat and I'll watch if there's any questions or clarification that can be offered.
Harry,
Yes.
it's Susan. Easier than typing my question if it's all right
Yeah.
if I ask.
Of course.
I found a general bullet, and for the types of roles that I'm applying for, executive level communication is really important.
Mm-hmm.
My question, to make it better, because what I have is generic, I just say like manage multiple stakeholders and build executive relationships across a bunch of departments.
Yeah.
So my question when looking for an outcome or specific, I have a few examples. One, how it's helped improve product escalations and make sure we meet product deadlines.
Mm-hmm.
And I have another one that's related to something else. So it's a general skill set. But
Yeah.
I guess my question is, what's the best example to give if it could be applied to like 5 or 6 examples?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you are in a position where you can apply a number, like a hard number, then I would go with that as the preferred example. So if you can say that you moved the needle on a program in something that's really tangibly measurable that you're allowed to share publicly, that's sort of best case scenario, right?
Okay.
If not, then if you can attach a different outcome. So in the example that I have here, it's hard to exactly measure the success of something like a parental leave policy, but I am able to reference that while we were creating these policies, it was to support scaling our employee headcount, right? And so it's not necessarily a direct outcome, but it includes a number, something measurable, and it paints a picture of the environment we were working in.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay. I've seen a lot of activity in the chat. Thanks everybody for getting in there. We're going to keep moving, but I will leave you with this as a recommended activity. Go through your resume in its entirety as an action item from this call and really look at those areas where you have these duties that are reasonably assumed. And think about how you might pivot those to be action-oriented or outcome-oriented, or where can you include specific tangible measurements in your resume. All right. I did put a little last-minute note in here because somebody who I follow on LinkedIn, whose name is Austin Bellick, put together a 7-step guide to writing job-winning resumes using ChatGPT. Now, I'm cuspy as an early adopter, not quite an early adopter, I'm somewhere in between, But if this is an area that interests you, if you're an early tech adopter, then I would strongly consider heading over and checking out Austin's 7-step guide to leveraging ChatGPT for resume building. It's a little bit of a new space. It's a little bit untested, but for folks who are comfortable in this tech or who are comfortable trying out new things, this is a pretty easy to follow, pretty comprehensive guide. So thanks to Austin for putting this out on LinkedIn. Okay, strategy 2. On your resume, we talked about the resume being a product one-pager. And when I think about a product one-pager, I don't think about it as a comprehensive list of everything that the product might do for me. A good example of this is buying a car, right? If you see an advertisement for a car, it's probably not going to talk about every single thing that the car is capable of doing, but instead it's going to focus on the things that that car does really well. This is essentially a sales activity. And so we want to sell your expertise, not necessarily your skill set. So how do you do that? I encourage the idea to be bold, to step into your confidence around the areas that you are truly an expert in and to highlight those. I think it's okay to mix hard skills and soft skills to attract the attention of recruiters and to bring some personality into how you sell this expertise. So I say here to omit details in your summary space. So now we're talking about sort of that top part of your resume. And omit details in your summary space that can be quickly gleaned from other parts of the resume, like say your work experience. So I put a sentence in here, 10 years of experience in partner cloud marketing. If I'm a recruiter and I'm looking at your resume, I will see that 10 years of experience at the top. I'm also going to see it again as I quickly spend 1 to 2 minutes reading down your resume, and I'll see all of your experience and I'll pick up a second time, okay, 10 years experience. So that sentence might not be doing the most work for you that it can because the information's available somewhere else, and you have some space constraints here and you have attention constraints. And so an alternative here is to use your summary section to sell a recruiter on your specific expertise. So I put a different version of this, right? A highly skilled GTM leader driving B2B campaigns, delivering new cloud partner growth and attributed revenue across multiple cloud ecosystems. This is another example that I was able to snag. So these two things are sitting sort of in the same role of a resume of trying to orient a recruiter to who you are in the professional space. One of them we see a lot of. I can't tell you how many resumes we look at that start with a level of experience. And one of them the example below is less common to see somebody who's really honing in on their specific skill or their specific expertise so early on. So I want you to now go back to your resume and just read the first paragraph of your resume, whether it's bullet points or a paragraph summary or an introduction. There's various ways that this shows up on the resume, but read that resume and ask, as you're reading that first paragraph or that first block in your resume, what do you see that makes you stand out as a candidate? So I'll stop for a moment and I'm going to ask you to go do that quickly. Okay. Now, as you read that summary, is your specific expertise obvious in the first top quarter page of your resume? Is it unique and is it bold? And I want to see if anybody is willing in the chat to just put your hand up if you're seeing some opportunity here to rewrite that top summary. I'd love to see that in the chat. Just a thumbs up. Do you see something there that you can focus on your unique expertise that maybe isn't there right now? Mary asks a question, is this our superpowers list? That's a really interesting, it's a good question. I think the superpowers list is hard because I don't know about that term. And what I don't recommend is a list of all of your relevant skills. Instead, I would think about custom to the job that you're applying for, and your resume should always be updated to the specific job you're applying for. What is your most relevant expertise that you're able to glean from the job posting is going to attract the attention of recruiters. So in this hypothetical example I'm sharing right now, this is a marketing role, but it's a go-to-market in a B2B space, right? And so the example here is to really focus on that relevant experience. So there is space to cover some of those superpowers on most resumes, but that very first section should be something custom to the job that connects your expertise directly to the job description that you're applying for. Okay. There's a good comment here from about the amount of jargon in the posted examples. That's a fair question. I think about using terms that are found in the job description. So each time I submit a resume, I think about customizing it to what we see in the job description. And so if there's jargon or industry specific terminology, I think it's okay to pull that into your resume, but it's a good point around jargon in the resume. Okay, the last step here, everyone needs an editor. Whether it is a professional resume writing service, whether it's an accessible service from a program like a workforce development office or a job force development office, or if it's a friend or a trusted peer or a trusted colleague, I encourage everyone to seek an editor and ask for them to look at your base template resume, look at your base template cover letter, and really scrutinize it. Typically, people aren't excellent at selling their entire scope of their expertise. We tend to want to downplay some of what we're really good at, and an editor can help you in clarifying your unique skill set and your expertise. All right, a little break now. We've done the first part of our work on our resume, and now I want to take a moment. This community at Women in Cloud is tremendously supportive of one another. It has always had a community feel here, and some of these folks, some of you are looking for work, some of you are hiring, and those roles are constantly changing. We might be looking for work this week and hiring next week. So I want to just direct everyone into the chat to say, what is the job title that you want? What is it that you are most interested in getting in terms of your next role? And then share your LinkedIn. And let's see if we can't foster some connection with each other right now. So we're going to take a minute and share your job title that you're seeking and share your LinkedIn. And if you see something as we're going through this that you've seen a recent role at a company where you might have a connection, consider opportunities here to connect each other to these roles. I want to acknowledge that my colleague, Jocelyn Kelly, Jocelyn, thank you so much for being here today, is here, and she just included her LinkedIn and an offer to connect. Jocelyn has a tremendous amount of experience recruiting folks into companies like Microsoft. And so I just want to call out that she's put a nice offer into the chat there. Okay. All right. Well, you're finishing up that. We're going to move to talking about recruiter outreach. For many job seekers that I connect with and that we connect with at Lions and Tigers, recruiter outreach can feel a little bit intimidating. It can feel hard to get started. And we also see all these statistics around how recruiter outreach can lead to more successful outcomes in the job search. So let's talk about why recruiter outreach is important. Human connection is going to be greater than the ATS, right? The applicant tracking system, the software that most companies are using to ingest applicants. And so we want to create this moment of human connection to help you beat the ATS, whether it's because it's crowded, because there's a lot of applicants, or because it's using an algorithm to sort resumes. Human connection is the way to sort of get over that ATS barrier, whatever it may be. And so how does that work? Well, I feel that being direct, and we have seen that being direct is the most successful outcome here. And it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be a really long message. So I give an example here with 4 components. One is a subject line that's really specific. AI project manager pursuing opportunities in data visualization products. So it's really specific. It's who you are and what you want. And then we include a message, which is that has just a couple of components. One, what's the context for the outreach? I recently saw you post on LinkedIn about AI trends. 2, what is it that has led you to decide to complete the outreach? I think my experience working with AI enterprise companies could be a good match. And then the last one here is that it makes a specific ask to the recruiter. Do you have time to connect in the next few days for a brief introduction? So 4 components: a really specific subject line, context on how you landed into this person's inbox, where you found them or what you saw, what it is that you're interested in or why you're interested in that role or that opportunity, and then what is it that you're asking from the recruiter. Do you want to have a conversation? And you include that in your initial outreach. So take a look at the beginning. I asked you to pull up your most recent outreach to a recruiter or to somebody in your network that you were hoping to have lead to an opportunity, and check to see, do you have these 4 components? I'll just give you a moment to read over that. There's a great question around advice on how to find recruiters, which I'll respond to in just a moment. That's a good question. Okay, so if you're missing one of the 4 components, which is a direct subject line, context for why you're in their inbox, why it is that you want to be talking about this role, and what it is that you'd like from the interaction with the recruiter, go ahead and draft a new version of that same email or LinkedIn message that you've already sent. Go ahead and draft a new version right now that is sure to include all 4 of those components. So the question is, any advice on how to find recruiters? LinkedIn is a really powerful tool here. On LinkedIn postings, you can, sometimes you can see who posted the role, but either way, you can typically find out information around the business group or the company, perhaps who the role reports to, or at least the title. And then you can try to sort of back into that. If you're applying for really big companies, you can sort of back into that in LinkedIn, and you can search for those teams and see what you come up with in the talent acquisition recruiter space. In smaller organizations, you can just do a company search and look at all of the people who work there at LinkedIn, and you can find the folks in talent acquisition to do that initial outreach. A third way is if you have anyone who's adjacent to the role or in that organization, but is not on the talent acquisition team, if you have a relationship with them where you can reach out and you can inquire, if they know who the recruiter is, if you have this sort of friendship or relationship where you might be able to leverage that to get a recruiter's name. Finding a name for a recruiter can be a really helpful tool, especially when you are looking at those jobs that have really high applicant counts. Okay. We'll talk quickly about, so this email, the simplicity of this email or this LinkedIn message is intentional. It's a lot of work to go through the job seeking process, and even a short message like this can lead to some pretty improved results. Okay. What if you know the hiring manager, know a member of the team, or know someone in the ecosystem, but maybe they're not the recruiter? Here, you can be a little bit more, you have the opportunity, depending on your relationship, to be a little bit more personal. So if I know the hiring manager and not the recruiter, and it's a role that I'm interested in, I might say something like, I noticed you posted a new role. Can we connect so I can learn more about this position? Or if I know a member of the team who's maybe not the hiring manager and not the recruiter, but works on that team, I might just send a note and say, I'm interested in this position, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about the culture on the team or the type of work the team's doing. I'd love to hear about your experience and see if you can get a conversation. Or lastly, if you know somebody who's maybe not on the team, maybe not the hiring manager, maybe not the recruiter, but they're still in that ecosystem, you can ask, set up a time for an informational session with them about the work that they do. The hope here is that through setting up an opportunity to connect with somebody who is maybe not the hiring manager or maybe not the recruiter, where you can express your interest, you can convert somebody to be an advocate for you, where then they can say, oh, I had no idea you were interested in this role or interested in this work. Let me introduce you to whoever that decision maker is, whoever that sort of gatekeeper is that you need to get through. And so these adjacent conversations can be really key to breaking through the count, the like high applicant count associated with a lot of roles. All right. We're going to cruise along. I'm seeing some questions in the chat that I'm going to return to shortly, but I want to cruise along and get us to our AMA. The last section here for recruiter outreach is to track and measure and learn from all of your conversations and all of your submissions. So I recommend a spreadsheet that looks something like this, which is, what is the role that you're applying for? What is the date that you've applied for that role? Which version of your resume did you use? So did you, with each resume, we recommend adjusting to include some of the key components from the job description. And so I would save a unique version of every past resume that you've submitted. Same thing with your cover letter. And I would actually recommend that for that summary portion of your resume that you paste in that content so that you can see the various versions of your summary that you've used. If you've been able to find a recruiter or a company contact who is that person, and then what date did you contact them? What message did you send? And did you get anything back? Did they reply? Did they say nothing at all? Did they invite you in for a conversation? And what was the outcome? And the reason for tracking all of this is because you'll begin to identify patterns in your application process around what's working really well to get attention. So you'll begin to start to see that this summary on my resume is getting more attention than this summary, or this recruiter outreach is getting me more responses than this one, and you can start to refine what it is that you're doing. It's really similar to how we might tackle another problem in the business space, right? We're going to try to collect evidence and we're going to try to glean insights from that evidence. It's exactly that. And so tracking your outcomes will help you get to the learn portion of the track, measure, learn cycle. Okay. Progress precedes success. Everything takes a little longer than you think it might. It's the progress part that we want to focus on. There is a common experience for job seekers, which is finding one or two perfect roles or perfect fits and applying for those roles, and then waiting to see if there's an outcome before either experiencing some level of disappointment or not hearing anything back at all, and then going back and finding another small handful of roles that feel like the perfect fit. I would encourage folks who are actively in the job seeking market to move away from the idea of the perfect role or the dream job and start to hone in on applying for as many of those roles that are focused in your center of expertise, that are aligned to your unique expertise as you can, and tracking all of those jobs that you apply for. And then consider using something like a time clock to track how much time, what your level of effort is on your job seeking process. Really get a sense of creating your job seeking process as your job, right? You're clocking in, you've got a set goal of how much time you want to spend on it that day. You're going to try to hone in on as many jobs that fit your unique expertise, and you're going to put it all in your spreadsheet. All right. Part 3, network building. We're going to go through this one quickly and then get over to the AMA. Strategy 1, participate in the conversation. One of my favorite quotes of all time is, "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good." Often I experience something when I'm on LinkedIn and I want to share about my experiences, or I want to comment on something, that I don't want the post to not be perfect, right? I don't want it to, I get maybe anxious about it. I want to make sure I say exactly what I need to say. And what we want to do instead is just get involved in the conversation with your experiences, or to be genuine, or to be kind. These are great ways to jump into LinkedIn and begin to participate in the conversation. So it doesn't have to be a really long or really brilliant new groundbreaking idea. You can get into LinkedIn and begin to engage with the people who are in the space that you want to be in by congratulating them, by thanking them for sharing something that you found insightful, or by saying something like, thanks for adding a perspective that you were excited to have in the conversation. All right, last activity. Jump over to LinkedIn and open your feed and find a post that you think you can add into the conversation with either sharing your experience, being genuine, or being kind. And then go ahead and add to that conversation. That's the second part. So find a post that you want to participate in, and then go ahead and add a comment to that post. We'll take just a moment for this activity. How does it feel posting on LinkedIn? Maybe one word. great, uncomfortable, nervous, fun, scary. Just go ahead and put that in the chat. What does it feel like when you are trying to engage in a conversation on LinkedIn? Yeah. Pumped, intimidating, scary. Yeah. I think I personally experienced some fear when I engage in the conversation on LinkedIn because I don't want to say anything that I shouldn't, or I want it to be perfect because it's public. And I've found that the closer I can get to one of these three categories of talking about my own experience or trying to be genuine, sharing some, enthusiasm for something that somebody else has done, or being kind, it settles me a little bit and helps me to engage in the conversation in a way that I feel more comfortable with. Okay. Last category, strategy 2, be helpful or add value to the conversation. Here is a great way to be helpful or add value while building your network. You may come across somebody who's seeking a role. We've met a lot of job seekers on this call today. You're beginning to connect with, and it might be for something that is not the right role for you, but maybe you know the recruiter or the hiring manager or somebody in the network. If you're able to use your network to connect others, this is a great way to build enduring connections. So if you can introduce recruiters to qualified candidates for things that are not necessarily the right role for you, not something that you're applying for, but you know somebody who's in your network, recruiters will remember that. And the next time they're recruiting for a role and you send them that message that says, hey, I found this role and I'd love to talk more about it, they're going to remember that you introduced them to this great candidate. So building those connections is a really valuable way to create enduring relationships with recruiters. You're an expert in something, so you can talk about what you know, you can talk about what you love, you can talk about what you need. My boss, Bria Starmer, who's the CEO of Lions and Tigers, is really good at this, talking about what she knows and also talking about what she loves. She talks about being a mom a lot, and she talks about what she needs. She talks about advocacy for working parents a lot on LinkedIn. It's a really genuine, authentic voice. So this formula of talk about what you know, or talk about what you love, or talk about what you need is a great strategy as well for getting engaged in the conversation. Okay. Consistency builds engaged networks. Liz Fosslin is somebody who does paid agency work. She's very smart, and she put together this graphic that I just love. And it talks about it shows relying on motivation versus relying on consistency. And this graphic, I think, does a really nice job of indicating, of showing, of visualizing what we're hoping to accomplish in the job seeking process, which is little steps every day that move us closer to the outcome that we want to see for our career. So thanks to Liz for putting that graphic together. The last thing I'll talk about, and then we'll take questions, is the idea of the path of least resistance. If you're not currently working and you're a job seeker, and your hope is to get to a full-time employee role at a blue chip firm or a big tech company, that is an excellent objective. It's also probably the hardest path from where you are to where you want to be, right? A full-time role at a big tech company, those are tough roles. So there's things that you can do between where you are today and getting to that ideal outcome that can do two things for you. They can build on your experience, and they can begin to produce earnings or revenue while you're job hunting. So if you're in that position, you can consider things like freelance work or contract work, or beginning to participate in the flexible or the gig economy that will help you build additional work experience and perhaps create some connections in that in the company spaces that you want to be in, while you're continuing to be on your job hunt if that full-time employment role is what you want. There's some statistics that we share at Lions and Tigers around how quickly the gig and the freelance role, how quickly the gig and freelance marketplaces are growing and how many workers are entering those spaces. It's not necessarily right for everyone, but it's a really excellent bridge for some to use those as opportunities to continue to do skill building. All right. That's it. And now I'd love to take any questions about the content that we covered here. So go ahead and put your questions in the chat. I'm just going to jump up because I know I missed a couple. So we have a question here. So we need to fine tune our resume every time according to the job posting. Yes. I would say 10 to maybe 20% of your resume content, 20% might be a little high, probably 10% of your resume should be customized to the job description that you're applying for. So going into that job description and pulling out either the key skills or the core competencies that the job description is looking for, and then incorporating those into the summary portion of your resume, or if you have a core skill section of your resume, and certainly if it's in your most recent work experience, so sort of getting those components integrated onto the first page of your resume can be really key. Recruiters typically spend about 2 minutes on a resume. And so we want to make sure that if wherever possible, you're incorporating the most valuable skills from the job description into the first parts of your resume where they're likely to linger for the longest amount of time. All right. Let's see. How do you build your network in the cloud profession events groups? Well, I'm going to do, I'll answer that question by saying a community like WIC is a great place to start if you want to build your network in the cloud profession or in the events groups. If you weren't at the top of the call today, WIC is launching a new program called Insider Circle, which feels like a really great way to build a network in the cloud space. There are also a tremendous amount of the LinkedIn communities that are highly niche for people who are in event managers, for example, that can be really great places to build community, that are great places for you to try adding value into that community and building those connections. Next question is it appropriate to ask job listers, hiring managers about pay and benefits before an interview if they are not explicitly stated? That's a really good question. What we see today is a lot of jurisdictions moving to pay transparency laws where a salary range has to be listed. I would say that if I were doing this for myself, I would first try to set a connection with the recruiter before I started asking about any of the really specific details, whether it's compensation or job duties or anything else with that individual, because the networking piece of this is not unique to that specific role. So if you can have a conversation with the recruiter, even if in your head you've got one role in mind, you can begin to build and foster a connection that can be enduring beyond that specific role. So I would say try to get the introduction, see if you can have a 15-minute Zoom call with the recruiter and begin to ensure that they know who you are and that they've got a sense of your unique expertise. And then you can start to have questions, or you can start to have discussions around compensation, job duties, some of those things that might be more specific to the role. That's a very good question. All right. Let's see. I think I've got all of the questions out of the chat, but I'm just going to do a quick check. If Marissa or Siren, did I miss any there that you saw?
Yeah, I saw one asked earlier, and then I think it was just re-asked. If people are returning back to the workforce and they might have like an employment gap for whatever reason, how do you address that on a resume or when you're going through that recruitment process?
Yeah, I would say don't be overly concerned about gaps in your resume. Gaps in resumes happen, gaps in work experience happen for a bunch of reasons, whether it's childcare or childbirth or a layoff or you know, a personal time. And to the extent that you feel comfortable, I would embrace those life moments. There's certainly been a move to have, you know, child care or parenting show up in places like LinkedIn and to some degree also on resumes. So if you feel comfortable owning whatever that gap is, you can think about how do you incorporate that into your resume. We talked earlier about working with a resume editor, whether it's paid or a friend or a government agency. And so you can work with that individual to strategize how to reflect what it is that you were doing during that time. You can do the same thing on LinkedIn. But generally, recruiters are a little less antsy about gaps in work experience today than I think they've ever been in my experience in the recruiting world. So work with your editor, think about how to reflect what it was that you were doing that led to the gap, but feel confident embracing your narrative. All right. Like, what if a recruiter inquires concerning compensation at the first stage of the process? How do you answer? If the recruiter inquires about your compensation at the first stage of the process, I would ask them what the pay band is for that role. I would typically ask the recruiter if they are inquiring about compensation, if the role has a specific pay band before I would respond to that question. That's a pretty spicy way to do it, but recruiters should be comfortable talking about the pay bands for jobs. And certainly as we see pay transparency becoming more and more important and regulated, there should be a pay for, you know, at least in Washington, most roles you're going to start to see are going to have pay bands. Okay. We're getting really close to time. I want to thank everybody for joining today, for asking really thoughtful questions and for doing some hard work around your resume and your networking and your recruiter outreach. I'm going to drop my LinkedIn in the chat here one more time. And if you have any questions or if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, send those questions. I'll do my level best to respond to them as quickly as possible. I actually think my LinkedIn is already in the chat. Yep. And I'll do my level best to respond to those as quickly as possible. You've all been great. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, WIC, for hosting. And I think that's it.